The universe is endless. It's made out of billions of stars and planets. Some of those planets have an atmosphere. Some of those planets also have water. If all the conditions are right, a planet can have life. By coincidence. You are living on one of those planets. You evolved from monkeys into human beings. So, who made all of this? Scientists will tell you it all started with a Big Bang, but they can't tell you what exploded. If this is your current worldview, I suggest you to keep watching. In this video we will take a closer look at the facts and proofs that scientists use to prove heliocentrism. You probably think this is easy to prove, but you will see that a lot of these proofs are based on assumptions. For centuries, people used to believe the Earth is flat and stationary. In 1532, Copernicus completed his new model of the universe. Despite urging by his closest friends, he resisted publishing his views until right before his death in 1543. This is seen as a major event in the history of science. It's important to know that Copernicus never tested his theory. There was no instrument or telescope at that time that could prove it. For 100 years people started to believe in this new model of the universe, but there were many things that scientists could not explain. No one could explain why people at the bottom of the globe are not falling off into space. Until Newton came with his theory of gravity in 1687. He needed more than 500 pages to explain gravity. The theory of gravity is based on the assumption that we live on a spinning globe. There was nothing that could prove gravity. Many more years went by and the whole world started to believe in gravity and heliocentrism. No one could prove it until NASA arrived. After World War II, Russian and American intelligence teams began a treasure hunt in Germany. The US military rounded up NASA scientists and brought them to America. After the discovery of flying discs and particle laser beam weaponry in German military bases, the War Department decided that NASA and the CIA must control this technology. Most of the scientists started to work for NASA. When NASA landed on the moon in 1969, they proved gravity, and in 1972 they made the first picture of the globe. Let's take a look at the proof of gravity.
Well, in my left hand I have a feather. In my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago, who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that? Which proves that Mr. Galileo was correct in his findings.
Until this day, this is still used as the official proof of gravity. Try to open the Wikipedia page for gravity and search for words like proof or evidence. You will not find it. The first picture that showed the whole globe was made in 1972 as the Apollo 17 crew left Earth's orbit for the moon. This picture has been used for over 30 years. It's in every science book and news article from before 2002. I have one big problem with this picture. This footage that was shown in a documentary aired on the BBC.
And finally, the element that seals their fate. Of all the footage of Apollo 11 requested from NASA over a 5-year period, one gem was discovered just before the completion of this documentary. an old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason prior to the mission, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Furthermore, it is apparent they are in genuine zero gravity aboard the actual spacecraft, necessary to convince the mass media of their authenticity, just not any further than Earth orbit, as you will see. In this never-before-seen or heard footage, not only is the radio conversation between the astronauts and Houston Control audible, there is a secondary, private conversation taking place between the crew and a third confidential party, prompting the astronauts with what to say, when to speak, and how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired misleading effect. NASA claims that the Houston transmissions were the only ones taking place with the astronauts. Listen now as Houston Control initiates a conversation with the crew, only to find them too preoccupied with the behind-the-scenes trickery to respond. Moments pass and the oversight is picked up on by the clandestine third party, who quickly prompts them with talk. Immediately, Neil Armstrong speaks.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger. We're mapping in on Earth.
Again, the illusion they are attempting to create is the Earth at a distance to demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private, until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil. We just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get the playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows, as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from entering through the other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom. This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18th, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
Hi, Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
Blue cast, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth.
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up and you can see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey away? Furthermore, if they genuinely went to the moon, why would they be faking any part of it? Why this trickery with the window? By faking being halfway to the moon, it becomes apparent that they did so because they could not even go halfway. It thus confirms that the stumbling block to their success was the lethal radiation of the Van Allen radiation belts. Since the same equipment was used on the subsequent missions in the 40 months that followed, none of them could have gone to the moon. They only increased their proficiency at staging them. When some TV viewers of the second manned mission to the moon telephoned the networks complaining that reruns of I Love Lucy were being interrupted, it became clear that for the taxpayers, once was enough.
I will let you decide whether this footage is real or not. In 2002, NASA released the next Blue Marble pictures. At this point in the documentary, I had a clip from NASA, but YouTube decided to block it worldwide since April of 2016. In the video, Robert Simon, the creator of the NASA Blue Marble pictures, explains how he made those pictures. He explains that the picture is made in Photoshop with lots of different layers. Since I can't show this footage anymore, I made a 2-minute clip where I will prove to you that the NASA Blue Marble images are not photographs but computer-generated images. Our proof that the Earth is a globe is a bunch of photoshopped images? Why can we not make a normal photo from one of those many satellites? If you look at the few pictures the other space agencies released, you will find out they all make composite images. Maybe you're thinking you can't use a normal camera in space, but the Chinese claim they use the HD camera. And then there is this next problem.
You don't really care much about sea level. No. If you want to be high, you're measuring your distance from the center of the Earth.
From the very center of the Earth.
Is that different from the center?
I'm trying to give it...
the very center of the Earth. So you want to find the farthest point from that center. And it turns out sea level at the equator is farther away from the center of the Earth than sea level near the poles. It has nothing to do with global warming and melting of the ice caps.
Why is that?
Because Earth, we know it spins once a day. Yes, thank you. 3 people know how long a day lasts here.
Good for row number 2. They're off to a great start.
So you spin, when you spin pizza dough, it kind of flattens out. Yeah. It gets wider in the middle. So Earth, throughout its life, even when it formed, it was spinning. And it got a little wider at the equator than it does at the poles. So it's not actually a sphere, it's oblate. And officially it's an oblate spheroid. That's what we call it. But not only that, it's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby is a good word. It's like pear-shaped.
Yeah.
So it turns out the pear-shapedness is bigger than the height of Mount Everest above sea level.
So NASA has been showing us those perfect spheres, but now scientists say the Earth is pear-shaped? Let's just try to prove its roundness for now. Everyone has seen pictures like this. These are taken by amateurs. This proves that we live on a globe, right? Well, no, there's another big problem here. Most cameras are using a wide angle or a fisheye lens. These lenses distort the image like you can see in this video. So when you see a curved horizon in a picture, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like that in reality. There are lots of videos from planes and weather balloons on the internet. Every time you see curvature, it appears to be because of the lens. There is a lot of footage that shows no curvature at more than 100,000 feet. Don't panic yet. There are other ways to prove the Earth is a globe. For example, the Bedford level experiment.
The argument for all practical purposes came to an end when the Church of England was established by law during the 16th century. They rejected many laws of the ancient Catholic Church, and to appear forward-thinking, they embraced many radical scientific notions prevalent at the time, including Copernicus' round Earth theory. With this endorsement, the theory found its way into the schools, which were then largely controlled by the Church. It has remained there to this day, and many children have accepted it without question. Perhaps the most significant experiments were those carried out on a canal known as the Old Bedford Level. Located in Cambridgeshire, England, the canal is perfectly straight over an uninterrupted 6-mile stretch. While there, Parallax conducted many experiments, all towards one conclusion: to prove that the surface of the water in the canal was indeed perfectly flat. In one experiment, a boat carrying a flag rowed from one bridge to another 6 miles away. An observer with a telescope placed 8 inches above the surface of the water found that the flag and the boat were distinctly visible throughout the entire distance. If the Earth is a sphere with a circumference of 25,000 miles, then over a distance of 6 miles, the second bridge should mathematically be 16 feet below the observer's eye line.
Many people have repeated this experiment and are getting the same results. This experiment was done by Matrix Decode. Subscribe to his channel, he made great videos about the flat Earth. Okay, you can start to panic just a little bit now, but still, the Earth must be a globe. We even know the size. Eratosthenes was the first person to measure the circumference of the Earth. He did this by sticking two poles in the ground in two different locations far apart. By measuring the different shadows, he could calculate the size of the Earth. Many people tell me this is another proof that the Earth is a globe. But in order for this to be proof, we have to assume that the size and the distance to the Sun is correct. If you move the Sun much closer, you will get the same results on a flat Earth.
2,000 years ago, an Egyptian scholar by the name of Eratosthenes performed an experiment that he claimed proved the Earth to be a sphere. However, there are serious doubts about the accuracy of his data and his scientific procedures. Dr. Leo Ferrari explains.
Oh, the Eratosthenes experiment is an experiment supposedly conducted in the 1st century, whereby this ingenious person was supposed to have proved, I say that in quotes, that the Earth was a sphere of some 4,000 miles radius. Eratosthenes one day noticed that the Sun was directly overhead in Syene, whereas he noticed that on the same day, at the same time, the Sun made an angle of 7.2 degrees to the vertical at Alexandria, which was some 530 miles away. How did Eratosthenes in the 1st century know what the Sun was doing on the same day in two places which are 530 miles apart? One can take all those same data, knowing that the Earth is flat. In one place you have the Sun directly overhead, and at another place, at the same time, 530 miles away, let us suppose that it does make an angle of 7.2 degrees to the vertical. Then we have a right-angled triangle, which it can be easily shown that the Sun is some 4,000 miles up in the sky. These superficial, even, considerations show that it's impossible. The whole thing, it's a story, a fairy story made up and mindlessly repeated in textbooks.
If we really live on a globe, how come it's so difficult to prove it? If there are really thousands of satellites in space, and how come there are only a few pictures showing the globe? Oh wait, I said satellites. That's what GPS uses, and it works. Does that prove the Earth is a spinning ball in space? Not for me. If the Earth would be flat, there would be no need for satellites. Without curvature, a ground antenna would have a much bigger range. It would also be much more cost efficient to use ground-based towers. Think about it, if we can make GPS work with only a few satellites, how come they place cell phone towers all over the world? Go to Google Images and search for a satellite TV dish. Try to find one that points straight up. If you want to keep believing in the globe, it's time to stop watching. If you continue watching, there is no way back. Have all scientists and teachers been lying to us? Well, no. All of the science is based on the assumption that we live on a globe. You can make most of the math work on a globe, but you need some stuff like gravity and relativity. Scientists can go to space to look. So, if they really believe something, are they lying? Have the space agencies been lying to us? Yes, but there's probably only a handful of people that know the truth. If you still trust NASA, please do your research. Search YouTube for ISS hoax or visit the YouTube channel Learn of the Jesuit Order. If you still believe NASA after that,
with a sphere of 4,000 miles radius being spun round once every 24 hours, a little bit of calculations will show that that person there is being spun round at about 1,000 miles an hour and it doesn't know it. I mean, this is obvious nonsense. You go on a merry-go-round and it goes, I doubt, more than 10 miles an hour and you get off all dizzy. You mean to tell me that people can be spun round at approximately 1,000 miles an hour and not know it? Why, if this is so, this whole room that we're in is supposedly being spun round at something of approximately that order of speed, and we don't know it, knowing that the Earth is flat. In one place you have the Sun directly overhead, and at another place, at the same time, 530 miles away, let us suppose that it does make an angle of 7.2 degrees to the vertical. Then we have a right-angled triangle, which it can be easily shown that the Sun is some 4,000 miles up in the sky. These superficial, even, considerations show that it's impossible. The whole thing, it's a story, a fairy story made up and mindlessly repeated in textbooks.
The flat Earth model claims the Sun is much smaller and closer. It's like a spotlight circling above our flat stationary Earth. You can see this with your own eyes. Just look at the direction of sun rays breaking through a cloud. Or watch some videos from weather balloons and look at how there is often a hot spot on the clouds right underneath the sun. The flat Earth model has the North Pole in the center. Antarctica is 360 degrees all around all other continents. This means that from anywhere on Earth, if you follow north you will end up in the center, if you follow south you will end up in Antarctica. If you follow east or west you make a big circle around the North Pole. So yes, you can circumnavigate a flat Earth, you just go east or west, but it's impossible to do it going north to south. When it's summer solstice at the North Pole, the sun circles above the Tropic of Cancer. This explains 24-hour daylight at the North Pole. During the year, the circle gets wider and wider until the sun circles above the Tropic of Cancer 6 months later. This explains the seasons. This map is also the UN logo. But look, the size of the continents is totally wrong. Does it surprise you if I tell you the Mercator map is only accurate along the equator and nowhere else? Well, I'm not making it up. If the Earth is flat and Antarctica is the outer edge, maybe there is more land. Why is no one going to Antarctica to check it out? In 1961, 12 countries signed the Antarctic Treaty System. Today 53 countries have signed it. This treaty prevents everyone from going under 60 degrees south without permission.
This afternoon I want to talk a little bit about the Antarctic Treaty. Now, I know everyone knows in detail about the Antarctic Treaty, right? Okay, well, I'm done. Okay. I want to talk about a little bit about the political history of Antarctica, and probably the most important question is, who's in charge? The treaty, you have to put yourself in the perspective of the time frame. This was an international agreement that was negotiated in 1959. And sometimes when I do a talk similar to this with a younger group of people, they have no idea what I'm talking about, but you can remember what the global political atmosphere was in that time period. There's quite a bit of tension, particularly between the United States and the former Soviet Union. International collaboration and cooperation was kind of a foreign concept. And the treaty was discussing two significant issues. There was a significant potential threat for international conflict over areas of the Antarctic, and it was a unique opportunity for the nations of the world to continue a collaboration in science that occurred during the International Geophysical Year, and I'll talk a little bit more. But there are now over 200 different agreed measures adopted by the treaty, and they address the environmental issues. They've taken sites of special scientific interest and set those aside, so if you want to go in there, you have to have a permit to go into that particular area, so it's not disturbed just by anyone. There are historic sites that are set aside with a management plan associated with them. So if you go to McMurdo, to the Ross Sea region, and you want to go see the Discovery Hut, they're only allowed to have 2,000 people into that hut during a calendar year. That includes all the people at McMurdo and Scott Base, as well as any cruise ship that might get in the area. And you can only have 8 people inside the hut at a time, and you must have a qualified guide with you. Otherwise, the door is locked. There's a lot of those kinds of provisions in the treaty, as well as the Kevlar provision as part of the system. It is absolutely amazing to me that you could get 12 countries in 1959, when you looked at that list of countries, to agree. Particularly the Soviet Union and the United States, but also Chile and Argentina and Great Britain, that all had overlapping claims, and to agree. But for this system to continue today, it's truly, truly remarkable. And people always ask, why don't they copy it? And there actually are parts of the Antarctic Treaty, especially the inspections and disarmament provisions in the treaty, that are part of other international treaties today. I actually was appointed, I was reading a report from a U.S. treaty inspection group one year, and as I was reading through it, it became obvious to me anyway, that some of the inspectors did not have an in-depth background of what they were looking at when they went to some other country's station. Of course, you have their list of everything their plans are and what they're going to do to look at, but they didn't know what they were looking at. So I wrote what I thought was going to be an internal memo about that, and the next U.S. treaty inspection group that went, I boarded an icebreaker in McMurdo Station and stayed on board for 6 weeks as part of the U.S. inspection team. So I got to be an inspector, and I've done that 3 times now for the Department of State. Now, one of the provisions in the treaty under those environmental protocols deals with tourism. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because we are all going to be directly affected by that. As I said to you earlier, the area of the Antarctic Treaty that it covers is any area south of 60 degrees south. So when this ship reaches that location, we are covered under those provisions. This ship cannot burn heavy fuel south of 60 degrees. This ship cannot carry heavy fuel south of 60 degrees. So the captain and the engineers have calculated very carefully how much heavy fuel they have on board, and they will be burning that off before we get south of 60 degrees. When we are south of 60 degrees, please, no food on the outside decks. We saw some pictures of birds earlier. If the birds come in, if you're out on the deck with food, and that bird comes in, you're in violation of the Antarctic Treaty under the U.S. laws, because this company operates from a U.S. company, so they have a permit from the Environmental Protection Agency to come here. No waste over the side. So please be careful if you're outside with a container, with your coffee with a lid on it, please. Be careful with the wind that doesn't get blown off. No smoking on the outside decks when we're south of 60 degrees. There'll be a location on the vessel, I believe it's a small corner in that heavily used casino on board, that you can smoke. Please be careful when you're out on deck. If you're pulling your pockets out of your parka, you're pulling your gloves out, make sure you're not dropping any trash on the deck that might blow over. It is illegal to dump anything over the side when we're south of 60 degrees. And I cannot tell you again about food, because these boys are much better at scavenging than you are, and they will come in and get you, and if they do, that's illegal. And they are well briefed. Trust me, you don't want a coming in, and if you've got something, they're going to hit you in the head first, and they're a pretty big bird. But please be careful of that. We will remind you a couple more times before we get to 60 South what the rules are, but we don't want to have any problems. This ship also operates under a permit that because of the number of passengers on board, we cannot do any shore visits. You have to have 500 or less. We're slightly over that. We also don't anchor while we're south of 60 degrees. And unless it's an emergency, we don't even have a permit to put a boat in the water. So, say when we get offshore from Palmer Station on Saturday, they come out to the ship to do a lecture on the ship. We don't go in and pick them up. They'll come out in their small boats, come alongside. So if you're up real early, I think they're due to get on at 6 in the morning, but they give a talk at 9 and again at 11 in this same place. Don't know who's coming from the station. It'll be a mix of science personnel and support staff. They have a short brief, and then they'll sit on stage and take questions from folks. It's interesting, on the last group, the person who got the most questions was the station chef.
Now let's take a look at the Coriolis effect. Lots of scientists love to use this as proof of a spinning globe. The Coriolis effect claims that water turns the opposite way in the other hemisphere.
But have you ever just looked for yourself and figured out which way your toilet swirls? Here in Alabama, I've noticed that some turn counterclockwise and some go clockwise. You see, most toilets have little jets in it, so the swirl direction is determined by the design of the toilet and not which hemisphere you're in.
Look on top and look at the lips. 1, 2, and 3. Remember, here in the middle the forces cancel out, so that's why here no whirlpool, no vortex, the water falls straight down. Okay? This is in the middle. But now I'm gonna make just a didactic illustration for the south and then north. Let's go to Australia. In Australia, there are cyclones. And those things like this. Ready? One, two,
Van a ver acá te va a quedar el sentido. Sorry.
Not a strong one, but the leaves are going clockwise. Cyclone, cyclone should stay like this.
Allá es el sur. Sí, el sentido horario.
And this is south.
Vamos a ver que allá tiene sentido.
Now, let's go north. Let's go to Canada. ¿Ya están listas? Listos, vienen al globo, por favor. You can see this every day in your home.
Yeah.
One,
so big.
2, 3.
So it's the other way.
The opposite way, counterclockwise. Hurricanes, tornadoes, you can feel it is in the northern hemisphere. And remember, the natural effect is produced by the rotation of the Earth. And that is Coriolis effect, Coriolis acceleration. Right?
So weird.
I need to put the water again in the middle for the next group, and then we'll continue doing more examples.
So, do you still believe in the globe? Maybe I should explain about sunrise and sunset, or about boats going over the horizon. Think about it. If you see a boat go over the horizon, looking straight ahead, that means you can see far enough to see the curvature. So, you should see a curved horizon also, but in reality the horizon always remains flat. When you zoom in on a boat that appears to be under the horizon, you can see it fully again. It has to be a clear day to be able to zoom this far. It's a matter of perspective. Everything converges in the center of your view. How far you can see depends on a lot of things like atmosphere and your altitude. Imagine looking at a balloon flying away from you. Even though it stays at the same altitude, as it gets further, it will appear to be lower to the horizon. Eventually, the bottom will start to disappear below the horizon until it's no longer visible. According to science, if you stand on a level plane, the horizon you see is around 5 miles away. If an object gets behind that point, it starts to appear below the horizon. If you take a camera and zoom in, the object reappears and the horizon you see will be more than 5 miles away. If you move up to a higher altitude, you can also see further. It's the same effect we get with sunrise and sunsets. It depends on the time of the year and the location, but you can often see the sun shrink in size as it moves away. If the sun is 93 million miles away, this would be impossible. Let's look at another big problem with the globe. If you are living here, the sun will be right above you at 12 p.m. We rotate once every day and we make one rotation around the sun every year, so 6 months later at 12 p.m. there would be no sun visible in the sky.
Hello, I'm Jeff Williams on board the International Space Station in Expedition 22, and today I would like to talk to you about centripetal force. A big word, but I know you use it and take advantage of it every day. We've heard about acceleration, linear acceleration and angular acceleration. With angular acceleration, there's a force that's produced. A force, of course, is required to produce an acceleration. That's true in a linear acceleration and an angular acceleration. If, let's say we were to take this object here. This is a tool. It's a special tool that we use on board the space station, actually during spacewalks. But it's a heavy metal object, and that's what I really wanted to use. And you can see I have it tied to a string, or with a string, onto this bungee right here. And it's just floating here in weightlessness. And you can see the string here is rather loose, and it's just kind of floating randomly. If I were to rotate this thing on the string around this bungee, and let me do this, you can see that the string pulls taut and stays tight, and the tool continues to rotate around the bungee. In fact, if you look really close at the bungee, you can see that the bungee bends at the point that it's rotating, and it bends toward the tool. And that is caused by the centripetal force due to the angular acceleration of the tool as it rotates around, keeping this string tight and keeping the rotation in a circular motion. It's the same kind of force that applies to the rotation of planets around the sun, or the moon around the Earth, or the space station around the Earth.
Thank you for explaining that, NASA. However, I have a huge problem with this. Maybe you are wondering what centripetal force means. I'm sure you all know centrifugal force, the force that would make everything fly off into space if we would not have gravity. Centripetal force basically is the centrifugal force or effect that appears when an object is attached to a fixed center. So, what is holding everything fixed to the center? Alright, it's gravity again.
They've been talking down new sources of energy. They dismiss wind power. They dismiss solar power. They make jokes about biofuels. They were against raising fuel standards. I guess they like gas guzzlers. They think that's good for our future. We're trying to move towards the future. They want to be stuck in the past. And we've heard this kind of thinking before. Let me tell you something. If some of these folks were around when Columbus set sail, they must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round. If I say that the world is round and someone else says it's flat, that's worth reporting. But you might also want to report on a bunch of scientific evidence that seems to support the notion that the world is round.
Because, you know, it's not just the flat earth stuff that's just hyping up, it's also the alien stuff. Because, see, to have aliens, you got to have space travel in a globe. And so, boy, it's just like a panicky kid trying to super clean his room because he actually broke something of his parents, and he, you know, I mean, that's what it seems like they're trying to really, really get our imagination again with all kinds of pictures and stories, and because they've lost us.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see their next big false flag saw be some kind of alien related thing.
Yeah, no doubt. They've been planning that one for years, and I think it's too late for them, and they got to be pissed about that.
Yeah.
So this is like the original Apollo, you know, only photo from space.
That's the blue marble, classic blue marble.
Here's the second real photo from space. Notice any?
We grew.
Where's the parachute?
Look at this shit. Can you look at America here? And even the shape and everything. And then this. Are you kidding me, right?
Somebody call Neil deGrasse, ask him where the parachute is there.
Well, it's right here. See?
Oh.
Just gotta squint.
You just gotta squint.
Yeah.
I
mean, really, this is what you guys believe. This right here. You want to tell me NASA doesn't fucking lie?
Matthew,
you think we went to the moon?
Matthew, when you have to shoot, don't talk.
Because I said I don't feel it spin, and he's like, well, you wouldn't feel it spin. So we wouldn't feel it spin if we're used to the spin. And I had somebody else tell me that just because they don't see the C curve doesn't mean there is no curve just because they haven't seen it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Weird shit like that.
We're too small on the big globe to see curves, right?
Which one's a photo? Which one's a painting?
Photo. Painting. Photo. Painting.
We are being brainwashed. Kids are being brainwashed. Be the change. Think for yourself and do something about it. Go to the NASA channel and ask questions. Contact professors at universities and ask questions. Do experiments and research and believe in yourself. One person can make a big difference. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. And in case you want, feel free to re-upload.
Now that Prince Harry and a team of injured servicemen and women have been walking to the South Pole, well, they've got there. They've completed the 200-mile Walking with the Wounded South Pole Challenge, that's its proper name. They've spent more than 3 weeks trekking through Antarctica, and this was what it sounded like at the moment when they arrived at the bottom of the world.
Let's go!
Sounds quite restrained, doesn't it, after all that effort? Well, they spent 20 hours in a cold chamber. This was the prince and the other competitors who were with him to prepare for the conditions that they were going to find down there. The expedition was supposed to be a race. You might remember it being billed that way before it started, but the weather became so bad as they went along that they scrapped the competitive side of things and just joined up as one big team instead. And this was how Harry reacted after completing the mission.
We're here, we made it. It's Friday 13th. We've had so many things go against us. We've had beautiful weather, but bad weather before, and bad terrain, and injuries and stuff like that, but everyone's made it, all 12 of them, the whole group of 20, whatever it is, but the 12 wounded soldiers have made it. Couldn't have made it without everyone's help, especially back home. You know, the founders, Ed and Simon as well. But everyone is so happy. Everyone's touched the ball. We've all had photos. We've all had hugs, a few tears here and there. But all in all, mission success, basically.
If you're wondering about that ball that he was talking about, it's the ceremonial South Pole at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. It's like a metal sphere on a red and white pole, and it's partly surrounded by the flags of the signatories of the Antarctic Treaty. So it's lovely for a photo, but the problem with it is it's not the real South Pole. It's about 300 meters away.
So at the real South Pole, what is that?
Well, there's nothing. That's the thing. You can't see. To do it properly, to cover all your bases, you have to do both. You have to do the picture with the ball, and then you have to go and kind of hang around at the exact
why don't they move the ball to where the actual thing is?
Well, that's a very sensible question. It's not one I can answer,
Okay.
but it's a very good point.
Let's have a look at the weather.